I actually just had the opportunity to speak with him in Amsterdam, and he's just one of those guys that you have to watch, tweet, and then follow, and do everything he says to do. So please bring your hands together for Scott Galloway, founder of L2 Think Tank. Come on out, Scott.
Thanks so much for that kind introduction, and thanks for having me. I'll try this one more time. OK, so this is the first and the last slide you'll see over the course of the next 20 minutes, and it's how you hold me accountable for your investment in time and treasure here. And so the objective for the next 59 slides and the next 19 and a half, I've lost 2.5 minutes, I'm at 17:52, is to be the greatest 20-minute ROI at Pivot. And that's a little bit ambitious, but I like my college professor's definition of God, and that is constantly grasping beyond your reach. So I'm going to start off with some context. I'm going to talk a little bit more about e-commerce than we've heard from the rest of the day, because I think at the end of the day, all the marketing and branding we do is trying to get people on a funnel to actually buy our stuff. So retail is flat in the US and Europe, and up 18% in terms of e-commerce channels. So this is the growing channel, and the majority of winners and losers will largely be determined in retail and in marketing by their ability to capture that incremental revenue going from the growth channel, which is e-commerce. Just some examples of some of the brands that I look at. We look at the prestige industry that are doing exceptionally well. Burberry sales up 60%, Ralph Lauren up 50% in Europe. Here domestically, Tory Burch sales up 90% year on year, Hugo Boss up 67%. And by the way, these numbers aren't growing off a small base. These are companies doing tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions online. So as you can see, this channel, even though it's not a new channel, continues to grow at a torrid pace. How offline and online consumers are shifting. The demographic gap between offline and online consumers is narrowing. Online purchasers are becoming older, and a greater share of purchases are full price. So the difference, it's no longer a younger consumer looking for a bargain. It's your typical consumer who's willing to pay full price. Consumer behavior dramatically different, as evidenced by the auto industry. The number of people skipping the test drive has doubled. The robust offering from automobile brands on their sites has effectively turned the automobile retail channel of the car dealership into warehouses. We no longer really buy cars in dealerships. We just take delivery of them and pay for them. We buy cars online now, even though we're not purchasing them directly. 2/3 of women who buy a luxury beauty product, as defined by a product that's more than $50, go online to research the product after they've purchased. The level of influence that these digital and social media channels are having on purchase continues to grow. So we know, and this is no surprise, the consumers state that they're willing to pay a tangible premium for better customer service. But the notion of what is customer service is changing. Clinique has registered that people have a greater likelihood to convert at purchase when they begin interacting with an iPad at Macy's than when they begin interacting with a beauty advisor. It's quite possible, and this has huge implications across our society, that over the next 20 years, you're going to see a loss of 40 million retail jobs. Many of these jobs power the middle class, or the jobs that we do in between other jobs sometimes, where our kids work in between college. And you're going to see this is going to be a terrible time to be a sales associate over the next 10 to 20 years. Think about what's happened in airports, where we no longer need to deal with an individual when we're checking in. A lot of companies are taking e-commerce from an adjacency where they're trying to mimic their store. And they're now taking their store and trying to mimic their website. So the new Burberry store on Regent Street in London, you take a trench coat off a rack, you scan the RFID code, and it takes you online and shows your purchase history and basically lets you go deeper into the brand vis-a-vis their digital content. So digital for some companies is moving to the center as opposed to trying to be an ancillary channel. Facebook continues to grow. I don't think anybody is arguing with that. We think the conversation begins in the data, and the great thing about academia is that our oath is to pursue the truth regardless of who impacts it, so we believe in winners and losers. And if you look at this graph in terms of the brands we track, in terms of where brands are investing and what platforms, obviously Facebook and Twitter, the majority of brands are on those platforms that we track, and we track 4,400 prestige brands. The brands that have had the greatest or experienced the greatest traction over the last 12 months have been Pinterest and Instagram. The brands that seem to be losing traction are Tumblr and Foursquare. Mobile, look at a Christmas effect. I mean, from December, just in 12 months, the percentage of traffic to the brands we cover has gone from 5% to 17%. E-commerce has tripled. We believe that in 2 years, and we have the data to show this, that the 4,400 brands we track, over 50% of the interaction digitally done with these brands is going to happen from a mobile device. That's just extraordinary, and I think all of us have been kind of caught flat-footed by the explosion in mobile. When Bill Gates said what takes 10 years usually takes 3, and what's supposed to take 3 years takes 10, I think that's actually an apt analogy for what's happened with mobile. We knew it was going to be huge. We just didn't know it was going to be this huge, this fast. Some exciting things, as you go up the income scale, the penetration of tablets goes greater. Tablets are converting to purchase at an average order value of $125 versus $80 for traditional mobile. I usually use my phone as a device. I'm a tenth as likely to convert to purchase off of mobile as I am off a PC, but I'm twice as likely to convert to purchase off a tablet, or put another way, people are 20 times as likely to convert to purchase from a tablet than they are from a mobile phone. So not all screens are created equally. So our basic thesis and our reason for being is we think that digital competence is inextricably linked to shareholder value. That the brands on this side of the room that leak shareholder value and the brands on this side of the room that accrete shareholder value, that the primary point of differentiation is their digital competence or their digital IQ. So we attempt to go out and boil their entire digital footprint down to a score such that they can track how well they're doing across their entire digital footprint. We look at 4 dimensions. First is site, everything from load times, user interface, navigability. We then look at digital marketing. That's their ability to drive traffic to their various platforms, visibility to search engines, buzz and sentiment on blogs, how well they do with contextual retargeting, banner ads, rich media, et cetera. We look at their social media platforms, size of these communities, growth rates, engagement levels. And then finally, we look at mobile, HTML5, apps, geolocal targeting. 675 data points, takes approximately 1,500 hours just to compile the data. We then try to soak all the data, put various weights on it informed by consumer behavior patterns, and we come up with a score for a brand. And we parse brands into 1 of 5 categories: genius, gifted, average, challenged, and feeble. This is meant to help a brand zero in on their weaknesses and strengths relative to their competitive group such they can more efficiently allocate capital moving forward. The weaknesses are opportunities because traditionally they're the easiest and least expensive places to fix. The strengths require a longer adult conversation because it's very expensive to maintain leadership in the digital domain where a lot of companies have decided to make huge investments. So I'm going to show you a ranking that was recently released when we looked at the fashion business. And the reason I chose fashion over autos or hotels, we do this for specialty retail, we do it for fragrance, CPG, is we can all sort of relate to fashion. They're fun brands, and they're interesting to talk about. So again, we believe in winners and losers, and when we do these rankings, someone does come in last. These are the brands that came in the feeble category. And typically the observation around brands that score in the feeble ranking in terms of their digital IQ, it's not an issue of poor performance, and it's an issue of resources. These are typically smaller brands that just haven't allocated the capital that warrants or that justifies or commensurate with the opportunity. Oftentimes you tend, at least in fashion, to find that they're more European, patriarchal, family-controlled brands that are essentially sitting around and kind of hoping the internet will go away. They really haven't bought into this medium. This is the most surprising category, and it's the challenge category. Here you have some big businesses and some iconic brands. Probably the 2 biggest disappointments in the world of digital IQ, in my view, are Hermès and Prada. These are unbelievable brands, huge resources, and they're essentially sitting on their hands around digital. I believe this is hubris, and if what we're saying is correct, and I believe the finance department at NYU has validated this, that poor digital IQ is a negative looking forward indicator of shareholder growth. I believe Hermès and Prada are doing their shareholders a disservice, and over the next 3 to 5 years will underperform their peer group because they have not embraced these digital platforms. You get into the average category. Average is not easy in this environment. It takes tens of millions of dollars to be average now digitally in terms of fashion. Dior unbelievably strong in terms of digital. You have some smaller brands that have relaunched their websites, Balenciaga, Bottega Veneta, Versace is doing a great job across social. We then get into the gifted category. These are brands where you have a CEO who's writing big checks for digital. Their e-commerce channel is starting to become a tangible part of their business. Their greed glands are getting going. Oftentimes, they're E-commerce is their fastest and most profitable growing channel. They've embraced social media as a means of perhaps reducing their offline spend, and they're starting to see the benefit of establishing direct relationships with consumers. The person running digital directly reports into the CEO and makes $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year and has real equity in the company. It's someone who can get things done. It's not just the youngest person in the room. It's the person oftentimes who comes from a very, very significant background and has some real authority within the organization. Then we get into the genius players. Vuitton, incredible offline and online integration from Paris to Shanghai campaign, fantastic use of rich media. Coach, embracing the blogosphere, the strongest site we've registered across the Digital IQ Index. Incredibly strong systems integration where you can pick a bag and then see if it's available in store. That sounds simple. It's a multi-million-dollar systems project. Gucci, fantastic with rich media. All their banner ads are now pinnable on Pinterest. Biggest surprises, Kate Spade and Tory Burch. We think these are the icons of the future. We believe the brands that are punching above their weight class and are scoring digital IQ rankings of companies that have multi-billion-dollar market caps are in fact going to be the multi-billion-dollar market cap companies of the future. And the best example of brands we would advise people to invest in would be brands like Tory Burch and Kate Spade, who are punching above their weight class. Ralph Lauren, incredible job of threading the needle between brand and commerce. Burberry, I'm sick of talking about. If you haven't heard, Burberry's very good at digital. Some of the findings, we then look at digital IQ by parent company and attempt to understand what about organizational structure, reporting relationships, relationship between parent brand and headquarters and regions and sub-brands drives digital IQ. And we've attempted to using LinkedIn, map the organizational structure of the largest companies in the world to try and understand who is doing well and who isn't and what's driving that performance. And as you can see here, there's huge disparity among brands. You can have a Feeble brand on the same floor as a Genius brand within a parent organization. And it's largely because most companies are based on a traditional post-World War II CPG format that you have accountability and responsibility and compensation solely based on your brand's performance. So while there's a lot of rhetoric about enterprise value and sharing best practices, until people are compensated psychologically or economically to share ideas across brand, typically, it's the brand with the most leadership and the most resources that does well, and the other brands just suffer. Over the last 3 years, we've actually seen a negative enterprise effect. The biggest conglomerates, LVMH, Richemont, Philips Van Heusen, Lavalux, their digital IQs have actually gone down. There's been a negative enterprise effect among some of the bigger companies in fashion as mono brands who are more focused and have embraced digital are starting to surpass their bigger, slower competitors. This is a very negative attribute from a shareholder standpoint. The whole point of a conglomerate is that the enterprise can justify the tax it places on an organization by adding value to the smaller brands, and it's not happening here. E-commerce, for all the excitement, only a third of fashion brands have e-commerce in Spain and less than half across Europe. Typically, this is a missed opportunity. The horrible thing about recessions is they always happen. The great thing about them is they always end. And typically, digital commerce is embraced and sees its highest growth rates as we come out of a recession. So the brands that are investing in e-commerce across the European markets are likely to reshape the e-commerce landscape if and when, not if, when the European market comes out of its economic problems. We look at longitudinal data. The entire market is moving forward, so you need to understand how you're doing relative to the movement in the industry. These are the biggest winners and the biggest losers in fashion in terms of changes in digital IQ year on year. There's huge investments made. We effectively show up with a no mercy, no malice metric and say, this is how you're doing relative to your competitive group. So see, these are some of the brands who are progressing or regressing, so to speak. Some basic tactics not being used. Only 1 in 7 prestige brands have user reviews. When you have 0% negative reviews or you control it or no user reviews, brands or companies are under the impression that that somehow leads to greater sales. It doesn't. Sha Yang, who was a colleague at NYU Stern and is now at the USC Graduate School of Business, has shown that sales actually go up when you have negative reviews of somewhere between 5 and 15%. The fastest way to increase conversion on your site is user reviews and to let people know who the product is for and also who it is not for. User reviews are the fastest pop in conversion in terms of ROI expenditure. In-store pickup, only 1 in 14 brands we look at have the systems capability where you can search online and pick it up in store. Some best practices: Oscar de Renta, punching above its weight class. You put stuff in your cart and you're immediately prompted if you'd like to meet or talk to a style advisor who can tell you what top would go well with that skirt. Also an opportunity to live chat with that same style advisor. We talked about Coach, an ability to search the store's product inventory by region such that you can pick it up in store. This is the percentage of first page organic results on Google controlled by these brands. On average, it's 20%. These brands are so obsessed with their windows, but the meta window for all of branding, they only control 20% of. To put that in perspective, 46% of that real estate is owned by discounters and e-tailers. These are the brands or the distribution channels these brands do not want to be associated with. So they're not managing the most important window in all of fashion very well. 2/3 of emails viewable on a mobile device. Only 1 in 7 are sending out abandoned cart emails. We find this is the highest ROI marketing technique in all of digital marketing, that when someone abandons their cart, you send them an email saying, hey, you forgot something. Some examples of that: John Varvatos, if you buy these shoes or put these shoes in your cart and you don't buy them within an hour, you get a reminder email. Another one within 12 hours, and another one in 24 hours. Huge growth on Facebook. The one here that's most surprising is Dior has come out of nowhere to have the third largest community. Burberry, we talk a lot about. In 2010, we registered that Burberry was getting 3% of traffic to its site from Facebook. Just a year later, it's now getting 33%, or 1/3 of its traffic from Facebook. We also track engagement. So this looks at size of the community and engagement. And ideally, you want to be in quadrant 1, where you have a huge community and it's highly engaged. And the only brand that's been able to achieve that is Dior. So trying to suss out growth versus engagement. As your community grows, your engagement will naturally fall because you're moving outside your core evangelist group. But there's a slope of that natural decline. So what we do is we map the slope such that we can tell a brand, given their growth, if their engagement rates are either greater than the growth would indicate or less than the growth would indicate. The idea, I refer to this as small data. How do you hold your vendors and your management team accountable? By taking out things like growth rate and brand equity, such that you can tell if you're actually doing a good job. When I come to these conferences, I see all these incredible statements about ROI, but it's hard to suss out the brands we inherited or look at growth rates relative to our engagement levels. We'll also attempt to take out brand equity, because the person running social for Chanel is just going to do very well because they've inherited broad shoulders and thick hair in terms of brand DNA. So what we look at is global queries on Google, and the ratio between global queries on Google, which we think is a proxy for brand equity, divided by the average size of our Facebook communities and come up with a natural ratio. We then pattern that ratio against the actual ratio, and we see who's overperforming relative to their brand equity. So a Burberry, a Dior, Lacoste, Gucci, Dolce are all performing, have bigger Facebook communities than their brand equity would indicate, whereas brands like Prada, Valentino, and Chanel are actually underperforming. People talking about this, an incredible metric for looking at buzz. So who would know that Tehran, Taipei, and Mexico City would be the places with the greatest buzz for Dior, Versace, and Louis Vuitton, respectively. Our brands are using this as a proxy for trying to plan their real estate strategy. Right? It makes sense you want to plan your stores, make these multi-million-dollar CapEx expenditures based on where your brand has the greatest buzz and equity. Upstream and downstream traffic is very interesting. Over the last year, we've actually seen YouTube grow in importance and Facebook decrease in importance. This is the percentage of brands that register this platform as a top 8 provider of destination or source traffic. So YouTube is gaining traction, Facebook is losing traction. You can also look at your competitors. This slide shows that Amazon is becoming a force in beauty. Sephora used to be the top upstream and downstream source of traffic for the top 50 beauty brands. Now it's Amazon. Effectively, what we're seeing is people used to go to L'Oreal and Estee Lauder and then go to Sephora to buy or check it out. Now they're going to Amazon. Facebook Commerce. These were all the brands in 2011 that had F-commerce stores. A year later, these are the brands. Facebook Commerce to date has been a big head fake and a big disappointment. I'm going to ping through these. Video. In the second largest search engine in the world, YouTube, these are the brands doing the best job on the left-hand side and the brands doing the worst job on the right-hand side. How much real estate does your brand own when someone types in your brand name into YouTube? And when you look at the conversion rates to purchase when someone has viewed a video, it's 2 to 3 times what normal purchase rates are when they come from anywhere else. So owning that valuable video real estate is really important. You type in Burberry into YouTube, and 20 of the 22 links that come up are branded videos from Burberry. This looks at size of Pinterest community. I think this is a forward-looking indicator of the most innovative brands in the sector. Same as Instagram. I apologize, I'm going fast, but I'm effectively out of time. Some closing thoughts here. The other more important battle, I think for all the hype that social media has gotten over the last 12 months, the reality and the ROI is about to take place in e-commerce and prestige brands. I think we're on the eve of a second great renaissance or great wave in e-commerce for prestige brands. The forces that are kind of slamming into this industry are obviously smartphones and mobile, and the tablet seems like it was invented for prestige brands because it indicates higher and indexes higher with a wealthy consumer, higher average order value. 12% of e-commerce for watch and jewelry brands is now coming off the iPad. Whole is less than some of its parts. A lot of enterprise values, a lot of large conglomerates are adding negative enterprise value. First and last slide. Sorry, I'm so rushed here. To be the greatest 20-minute ROI at Pivot. My name is Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.